Iran has denied President Trump's claims that Tehran has sought a ceasefire with the United States.
Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi says he sees no reason to negotiate as all sides intensify strikes. Mitch McCann is covering this story for CNA.
Donald Trump sometimes has a tendency to simply change his mind, and a couple of days from now that might be the case. But right now it looks like neither side is actually interested in diplomacy. Iran's foreign minister was on US TV today, and he said Iran has not asked for a ceasefire, nor has it asked for negotiations. He said we're ready to defend ourselves as long as it takes, and that comes as Donald Trump has said this weekend that while he waits for the Strait of Hormuz to be open, quote, the United States will be bombing the hell out of the shoreline and continually shooting Iranian boats, and ships out of the water. Now, that doesn't sound like diplomacy to me from either side. Now, Chris Wright, he's America's energy secretary. He said today that he expects the conflict in Iran to last a couple more weeks. And when it comes to Israeli strikes on Hezbollah targets in Lebanon, Israel's ambassador to the UN said only a couple of days ago here in New York that that will continue as long as the threat remains. So I think we'll be keeping a close eye on whether, when the United States decides it's time to wind down this conflict, whether or not Israel agrees and is on the same page with Washington.
Okay, for more insight, we're joined by Dr. John Blaxland, who's director of the ANU North America Liaison Officer, a professor, that is, of international security and intelligence studies at the Australian National University. Doctor, it's nice to see you. Thank you. So much emphasis now on securing the Strait of Hormuz. Just want to get your thoughts on President Trump requesting that other countries help secure the strait, now even linking China's help to possibly delaying his meeting with President Xi Jinping. Can you tell us how you see this effort panning out?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Look, it's really interesting because China has clearly made a deal and it's able to get its oil shipments out through the Strait of Hormuz unimpeded. It looks like India has done the same thing as well. And this leaves Europeans and others, particularly allies in East Asia, Japan, Korea, Australia and others, quite vulnerable to not only the spike in prices, but the prospect of significant oil flow disruption. The problem is that, we can go long, you can play long game, or you can try and go the short game. And it really does depend on what President Trump is trying to achieve. It's not completely clear. If it was decapitation of the regime, there is a theory out there that the day after is when things will happen. So what you want to do is perhaps cut the war short and allow the mess of what's happening in Iran to kind of bounce back and undermine people's support for the regime. But of course, that's not necessarily going to address the issue of the oil flow. Pundits are now saying it could take up to a couple of months before resources are in place, mines are cleared, the coastline is cleared of sufficient threat to enable enough shipping to pass through unimpeded. So this is not something that can get resolved overnight, even if allied partner nations are prepared to sign up for this, which is up for debate because many navies are actually quite vulnerable to the new form of warfare. The drone warfare that's emerged, that's affecting the Gulf cooperation countries, is one that the navies operating in very tight waters, such as the Strait of Hormuz, are really reluctant to take on. So to have a campaign involving clearing the Strait of Hormuz without the cessation of hostilities would require a major multi-phased effort involving clearing under the sea, surface, above surface, and along the coastline. And so how do you assure that? Well, you can bomb a lot, but you probably need ground forces, and no one seriously wants to entertain ground forces. So what's the fallback option? Well, the fallback option is declaring to the Iranians that we'll keep bombing until you let us pass, and we'll up the tempo, but if you stop, we will stop. And I suspect that that's going to have to be the deal, because the prospects of otherwise are simply, staggering, and we haven't quite fathomed what they are yet.
So, Professor, you mentioned India earlier. It appears to be taking a sort of a unique approach. It says direct talks with Tehran have already helped its tankers pass safely through the Strait of Hormuz. I wonder, does this suggest more countries may pursue their own sort of bilateral arrangements with Iran? And could that weaken U.S. attempts to build a sort of a coordinated response in the Strait?
So that certainly is plausible. That's certainly something that I think the Iranians will be working on. And they've, I think, trying to break away, particularly Gulf cooperation countries, from being supportive of, or at least, complicit with the United States in the support of air bases and other support facilities around the Persian Gulf. They're all desperate for this to get lifted. They're all under a lot of pressure to resume the flow of oil, to get the ships passing through, so that the production can recommence. There's enormous wealth at stake, enormous resources. Let's not forget also about the impact of trade, of the airlines, particularly Qatar and Emirates airlines that operate in this space, that are effectively completely hobbled at the moment, until the airspace can be guaranteed. And you can't do that when drones are flying, when war is afoot, and when the United States and Israel continue to fight it out with Iran. This has got to be brought to a close sometime soon. And it's really, really difficult for countries like Japan, as I say, Korea, Australia, and others, who are caught in the crosshairs, because China is pretty safe. China's actually, sure, it doesn't want prices to go up. It wants the flow to not affect prices too much, but they still are maintaining a flow. So they are in a stronger position than other countries, and certainly this is something that it appears the United States hasn't taken fully into account as it's thought about this. But it's also worth thinking that Iran has been a proxy for China and Russia. Russia and China both have quite deep and strong links with Iran, and so the United States under President Trump is probably also seeing this not just about a replacement of Khamenei as the head of state, but about the implications for their ongoing relations with Russia and China, let alone the relations with Europe over the war in Ukraine. This has become much more complicated than I think the US administration anticipated, but it does require a degree of deft handling, perhaps a degree of humility on both sides, to acknowledge that the way out is to both kind of claim victory, if you like.
Okay, Professor, if we could just focus on maybe the Gulf states, as missiles and drones continue to cross into their airspace, just how close are these countries to being drawn directly into the conflict? I mean, do they have a unified stance on how to respond?
So there's quite a lot of disagreement between the states. They're all obviously got varying forms of relationship with the United States. Qatar has had a closer one with Iran than the others, but they're all wanting this to stop. So the question is how well they can come up with a scheme. And at the moment, the infrastructure is not there for them to have alternative routes to get the oil supplies and other goods out of the Persian Gulf. They really have to transit through the Strait of Hormuz. And that really means that they've got to either convince Iran to back off, and or the United States to claim victory and to draw a line under the sand, if you like, although that metaphor is proving a bit problematic with ships being sunk in this space as well. And of course, it's really a narrow space. And so when people talk about the prospect of breaking through, or being able to escort ships through this space, it's not like an Atlantic convoy of World War II. Where there was enormous space and the confidence that you could perhaps navigate around, the enemy. Here we're talking about a very limited space where there's line of sight, there's clear visibility, and you can be hit by anything from the shore, right on the shore, or further inland, even if the capabilities are significantly degraded, it still leaves these massive, lumbering, slow-moving ships extremely vulnerable. They're not really easily protected by much smaller warships that have themselves limitations in light of the challenges of modern era drone warfare.
Dr. Blaxland, at this point, countries are mulling their decision on whether to form more military presence in the waterway. Should there be a heightened military presence there? How could it change the dynamics of this conflict? Just a short note from you, please, on this.
Yeah, no, I think it's probably, when we think about trying to convince the Iranians to back off, a coalition emerging to support the United States, as much as it's probably problematic, given that many of them feel very slighted by America's approach to working without consulting them, without consulting the UN, without consulting any international body. But there is an imperative here for them to help the United States come to the point where they can make a break, where Iran can feel the pressure, and the United States can feel the support and use that perhaps as the point at which to say, let's call it quits here now.
Yeah, it's finding the right balance indeed. That's the tough one that we're seeking right now. Thank you so much for your thoughts, Dr. John Blaxland from the Australian National University.